CEO, and today we have a great conversation with two extraordinary individuals on mobility and the inclusion in that space. So as it kind of relates to this podcast and why we're doing it, at Goodie Nation, we really exist to close what we call the relationship gap. And the relationship gap is defined by the lack of access between diverse founders and social entrepreneurs, or really entrepreneurs in general, and key influencers, particularly those from top companies and those from top colleges and universities. And so what we see in our space is that there is a large gap for diverse founders and social entrepreneurs and their connection to key influencers. And so this show is dedicated toward telling their stories, telling how awesome they are, and showing why relationships matter, not only for them, but for entrepreneurs across the world, so that they can go out and build amazing companies. And so I have the honor and the privilege to be joined by two amazing individuals today, Brandon Winfield and Joy Guerin. And so I cannot explain how awesome they are, as many of you all know that for me. And so I'm going to let them do their thing for some quick intros, and then we'll get into the conversation. So Brandon, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Brandon Winfield. I am 28 years old, pretty much based out of Atlanta. I actually grew up in the Alpharetta area, but if you're not from Georgia, we just say Atlanta. So yeah, I am the CEO and co-founder of iAccess Life. We are a mobile application that exists to allow users to rate, review, and research locations based on their accessibility and kind of take the guesswork out of going out to new places.
Awesome. Joy?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Joy Guerin, and I am currently a senior manager of product management at Root Insurance, an insurance tech company, brand new, newly IPO'd, with the goal of unbreaking insurance and really bringing more equity into the space. Prior to joining Root in June, I was at ParkMobile for the last 4 years. Many of you are familiar with ParkMobile, and ParkMobile is a mobility and payments platform for parking and mobility. So nice.
Awesome. So let's get into it. So I want to give some context, really before we go into the origin stories of these amazing individuals. I want to get some context about how this whole show kind of came to place. And so a few months ago, I think it was in June. My memory is kind of shaky these days, so it could have been a different month. Could have been May, could have been July. But Brandon, who I've known for a few years, was interviewing for the Goodie Nation Intentionally Good program. And I was telling them about the program, and one of the key things that what we do is what we call weekly accountability group stand-ups. And so as I'm talking to him about the program, I mentioned it one time, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, maybe this is offensive. And then I'm going to, and I say it again. And after that second time, I'm like, oh, wow, this is pretty offensive. Maybe I think we should change the name. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brent. I think I brought it up to you during the actual interview. Yeah. And so I think I committed on the spot to change the name of Stand Up to something else. We actually ultimately landed on Huddle as an organization, but it was important to me because, and not to say that we're amazing at Goodie Nation in me particular, but I started to think about like when it comes to this whole diversity, equity, and more importantly, inclusion space, a lot of times the attention is focused on race or ethnicity. Sometimes it's on gender and a few other areas, but I think there are a lot of other kind of subcultures or subpopulations, so to speak, that are excluded when it comes to inclusion. And so, Brand, I want to kind of get your thoughts on that, but also your origin story.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, you did end up changing it right away. The first one I came to was called a Huddle. And we were kind of talking offline a little bit before we started this, but I worked in the IT space as one of my first kind of career paths, I would say at the time. And I remember going every Friday to a stand-up meeting where everybody would stand up and I would be the only person sitting down. And funny enough, that's kind of part of why I ended up in the space that I am of having this mobile app. Was I never really let words offend me. And I think that was kind of part of the way I was raised with my family and them just saying, this is what it is, embrace this and be different and be who you are. So I kind of took the stand up as, well, I feel like that could be better approached and come up with a different word for it. but I never was somebody to create a scene or kind of go out of my way to say, oh, poor me, what about me? So that kind of jumps into my founder story a little bit. I grew up racing motocross. That was always the dream of mine, was to race professionally. And now that I think back about it, I was actually manifesting things before I knew I was manifesting things, and before I really knew what manifesting was. I always wanted to ride for Honda. I always wanted to have the gear that I got for free with my name on the back and my sponsors on the front. And I was able to check those two boxes off. I wanted to be homeschooled and go race these big races. I got to do all that. And I ended up getting hurt when I was 14. So just 2 years before I could legally, turn professional. So I knew the risk of what I was doing. I was doing what I loved. All those things kind of helped me transition into a lifestyle of, hey, let's make the best out of what we have. It wasn't a freak accident. I met a lot of people in rehabilitation that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Were just doing things that they probably shouldn't have been doing. And now they're suffering from this tragic event that, they probably never had a major injury in their life before. So I met a lot of people that were very down, and I didn't want to be that. I wanted to go back to having a great time, getting my driver's license, going on dates with girls, hanging out with friends, going to parties. And that's what I did. But through that kind of journey, as I got older and left the neighborhood of Alpharetta and Johns Creek, which was growing and relatively new, and took ADA compliance into mind, I would go down to downtown Atlanta essentially and be met with very uneven parking spots, locations that had a lot of stairs to get into the front, where you'd have to go down a back alley, someplace that wasn't very well lit, and go in a back door to access it. Bathrooms that were not accessible, and the issues that caused for me, since, I had to take care of that when I need to take care of it. And going back to just me being somebody that wasn't a complainer, somebody that didn't want to make a scene, I decided to create something that was a solution instead. And that was a mobile application that was for the people, by the people, essentially. You would get accessibility ratings from somebody that you knew had a disability. You weren't calling a 1-800 number to talk to somebody at the place that has no idea about accessibility. And I just really wanted to give and empower those people that I saw in rehab that had seemed to have given up on life and having a good time. And I wanted to give them a way to have fun and a way to confidently explore and be independent and just have a good time and access life, essentially. So that's kind of where the name comes from.
Nah, I love it. Amazing, amazing story. There are so many things I think I want to ask a little bit later on, including, as we think about as the world, Delta variant, other whatever Greek letter variants kind of come next. Hopefully they won't. What does inclusion from the mobility standpoint look like in a post-pandemic world? But Joy, I want to kick it to you. What's your origin story? Eventually, how do you get into tech? All that.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a big part of my origin story has to do with childhood. I kind of grew up in a home. My father was always interested in technology. I think for as long as I can remember, we had a computer in the house, kind of from an early age. I remember, having to launch my games from, a DOS command prompt and all of that good stuff. So I was always kind of comfortable with technology from just having access to it in my home. And then when I was in second grade, the local HBCU in Baton Rouge, Southern University, which was a huge part of my childhood, they had a program called Engineering Summer Institute, which was the first place that I learned how to code. And I think the language that they taught us that summer was like Logo or something like that. It was basically kind of, you type in a bunch of code and the output might be some little animated stuff going on. And then by middle school, the AOL was a big thing. And I was really curious about how people were creating these GeoCity sites. And so I just started printing off reams and reams of like tutorials on how to code HTML, and kind of starting in middle school, started teaching myself how to make basic websites and doing all of that good stuff on GeoCities. Fast forward to college, I joined a sorority, and, they were looking for someone who could help out with our website and with kind of graphic design and those things. And so because I had those skills, I was a music business major. So a part of my major was graphic design, technology, a lot of different things combined with music. And so I picked that up and was just really, using it to help organizations. And long story short, my first foray into professionally, I guess, doing technology for money, I interned. My mom got me an internship with a local radio host, a talk radio host, and I was kind of just running errands for him and doing different things. And he was like, "What skills do you have?" And I started maintaining his website. And then one day out of the blue, a woman in Baton Rouge who was an artist called me and she said, "Oh, this person told me that you design websites. I need a website. How much do you charge?" And that was my introduction into, okay, figuring out how do I, properly price my services and all of those things. So that led me down a road, which to briefly kind of sum up my origin story, I finished college, continued to freelance and do a lot of technology work, and then ended up going to business school and getting an MBA. And then I came out knowing that I wanted to do something that combined technology, business, kind of design, and overall kind of general management. So after a rotational program, I found myself working with an HR partner who was like, product management would be great for you. I didn't know what product management was. I didn't have the language to really ask for that job, but it ended up being a fantastic fit. And so for the last 5 years, I've really been working with companies that are focused on kind of, enlarging the table, if you will. So I, started out at Career Builder, where we were really focused on lower wage or lower skilled workers and how can we help them chart a path from where they are to kind of jobs that pay a little bit more, helping them fill the skills gaps and just gaps in understanding for how do I get to point A to point B. And then I moved over to ParkMobile, where we're really focused on, increasing transparency around parking. It's great because I was telling Brandon before we got on the air that I was excited to meet him because he actually did a deal with one of our competitors, and I was super excited kind of reading about it and because we were thinking a lot about how do we surface accessible parking as well. And also looking at accessibility overall in our application and our consumer experiences. And then now I'm at Root, where we're really focused on like, how do we unbreak insurance and really, enlarge the table for people so that they're not penalized for a credit score, let's say, when it has nothing to do with their driving, right? And so that's kind of been a theme for me over the last few years. And I'm really enjoying kind of looking at all of these different spaces and what inclusion means in those spaces.
No, that's awesome. So as I started to listen to the origin story, by the way, what sorority are you in?
Delta Sigma Theta.
That's awesome. My mother and few aunts are Delta. So here's the interesting thing. One of the reasons why relationships matter, the way that we do them and draw the lines between making connections between guests. And again, when we thought about, awesome guests for this show, had no idea that Joy was even, familiar with Brandon, was obviously super excited. But for me, my origin story, I've shared this on several other podcasts. So I think as people continue to listen to this, you'll probably know me pretty well, is that I too got my start in tech through an HBCU summer program for high school students. And so my summer project at Tuskegee University was to learn HTML. And I'm dating myself. This is summer 1996 as I went into my senior year of high school. And so, that was not the intention of my summer project. It was not the intention. I was supposed to be doing something in mechanical engineering. My professor, who was the person they assigned to me to lead the project, just so happened to know HTML and be interested in it, in the web and the internet back then. This is like, you know what? I'm not going to teach this guy about mechanical engineering. His summer project will be the internet. And he taught me how to build websites that summer. And from that point forward, I thought about a solution based in the internet. And that's my entryway into tech. So if he's like, yo, dude, like, I'm going to teach you this mechanical engineering thing, like, Joey Womack is never in tech. And so going to the GeoCities, and I'll stop here because it's ain't about me. The first time I ever built a website was on Homestead back in the day. I had a thought when I went on to Florida A&M and had an idea for a website, use Homestead to build it, and actually going back to the fraternity sorority piece. That was what I ended up pledging like a few months later, quite honestly. And the the older brothers, the brothers then, were interested in me in most part because I knew how to build websites. So also Joey Womack probably is not an alpha. If any of my profiles are watching right now, he's probably not an alpha if he doesn't, build websites and stuff like that. Anyway, so let's talk about, Brandon, I want to kick it to you about, kind of where you are today, right? And along the way, or if you could give like examples of how relationships, forget for a second, like where you are today. Let's talk about any kind of key relationships, like individual people that you may know that have kind of caused some inflection points along your way. So I don't know if anybody kind of jumps to mind for you, in your entryway into tech or, kind of what you're doing right now.
Yeah, quite a few people, honestly. Like my background story is growing up racing motocross. That was the focus. I don't want to say I was a dumb jock because I think I was relatively just kind of naturally not quick-witted, but just street smart, essentially. I had some wits about me and I could, not study my way through school and still get B's and just do enough that I would be able to ride my dirt bike and not make my parents mad, essentially. So I paid enough attention. I did my homework. I did everything I could, but it was never the focus. So coming into this space, I had no prior business background. I didn't know what an ROI was. I didn't know what was in a business plan. I didn't know how to do projections. I didn't know anything, honestly. I just looked up how do you make a mobile app. I saw how much money it costs to get one of those done. I said, I don't have anywhere near that amount of money, and I don't know how to acquire it. So I just started doing a whole bunch of research. And down the road, I honestly spoke to, my dad was one of the main people. He worked in IT, knew a lot of people that had developed apps before, and he actually got me in contact with some of them. We started working together kind of on a preliminary prototype, essentially. And they just ultimately didn't see the vision that I had for what I wanted to build and what it could do for the community, and like just making a group of people that were out having a good time and just kind of building that relationship. So I ultimately didn't work with them. I took a chance, and they were going to actually build this for free just because they thought it was a sign of good faith or something, essentially, and they were just going to help me out. And I kind of took a chance and didn't work with them. So I was kind of thrown to the wolves of how do I do this? How do I raise money? And one of my close friends at the time, Zach, he had an uncle that was the CEO of a company that I would confide in and kind of talk to him about everything about how to go about this. He did a lot of help with me, or did a lot of work with me and helped me out a lot. And I mean, ultimately, the biggest person was my co-founder, Saeed, coming on board. That was just through me doing a lot of the groundwork, starting an LLC, getting some videos together for what the app would be like, finding a family friend, Jay Bailey. It's not Jay Bailey, a different Bailey, actually. And he actually helped us out get a prototype, and that's kind of what kicked everything off. And then my sister posted a video on her Facebook of what we were working on, and Saeed reached out saying, hey, that's a really cool project that he's working on. I kind of have this tech background. I graduated from Georgia Tech, and I can help him out as far as getting things together that he needs. And that was, the kickoff point for everything for me, was having that guy that had that background, and he filled a lot of gaps that I didn't have, essentially. So relationships were really important to me. I at first wanted to do this by myself and prove that I could do this. And then as things started to progress and get more difficult, I needed other people, and having those relationships and just kind of being a good friend to people and being somebody that somebody wanted to help out really paid off in the long run for me.
Nice. Before I kick it to Joy for the relationships that matter, throughout her life, especially as she got into tech, I think here's an interesting connection point. So I forgot to mention, so Joy used to be a volunteer for Goodie Nation as we did our hackathons. And I want to say, Brandon, that I actually met Saeed first at one of the Goodie Nation hackathons that I think Joy was actually, part of the team with. So tell him I said what's up. By the way, we haven't spoken in a minute, but tell him I said what's up.
I will. He actually brings that up, especially when I got involved in Goodie Nation and what we're doing now. He's just like, man, if I wouldn't have gone to that conference, I probably would have never got in front of him, got to talk to him about what we were doing, and all these relationships with everybody else wouldn't have kind of fallen into place. So it really pays off. And one of the things I I work at Atlanta Tech Village helping startups here. And one of the things I tell people is just to show up to events and be there and be consistent. And you may not have the best product yet, you may not have the best business plan, but people will invest in you and that kind of relationship that you can build with somebody, or they'll make an introduction to somebody that can really change things for you. So show up to these things, talk to people, and kind of put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to, get shot down essentially.
Yeah, no, there it is. There it is. I mean, so Joy, what are some of those inflection points, those relationships that mattered, throughout your life?
Yeah, when I think about the relationships that have been really impactful for me, I kind of think of them in maybe three categories. So one is really just about like skills building, like building expertise. Second is really about exposure. And then the last one for me, which is really big, is about confidence, because I think that one thing that I noticed about myself as I've kind of made the journey through different stages of life is that it's gotten less important over the years, but I used to really struggle a lot with imposter syndrome. And so I think a lot of those key relationships for me were people who opened up the door so that I could see how the sausage was made, so that it was less intimidating for me to take the next step. And so starting, I'll go back to Southern again. In high school, so I also was participating in Southern's summer pre-college programs. And the big one that I was involved in for like 3 or 4 years was called the Timbuktu Academy. And it's Dr. Jola Bagayoko, who's a physics professor at Southern, had a grant from NASA. I heard you say on a previous episode that you were in a program that like paid you $1,000 in the summer. And this was also my motivation. So it was the same sort of thing. I was like, oh, I could go to this program where I'm going to learn physics. They're going to drill me on all of these things that I need to get a higher ACT score and get paid $1,000, or I could go work at the mall. And it was like, clearly like I get, two for the price of one by going to the summer program. So really going through that every summer, like I'm not a natural science and math person necessarily. I'm not bad at it, but I'm also not like, it's not my most comfortable space. And so just, being forced to be in chemistry lab and take college physics concepts kind of early on, even when I didn't understand them and didn't know what I was doing, I think lowered the fear that I had, about potentially like wrestling with new concepts in science and mathematics. So that's a big relationship that I think was important for me to give me that kind of exposure. The second one I would probably say, going from being a new college graduate into business school, I would say one of my best friends, her name is Lynn. She when I was probably 2008, I was talking to her, and she was in banking, working on Wall Street, and both of us were kind of talking about what we wanted to do as a next step. And she had gone to Spelman. And was a chemistry major, but she had gone to Wall Street kind of coming out of undergrad. And she was looking at a program called Management Leadership for Tomorrow, or MLT. And I had never heard of this program. She told me, oh, I'm, going to be applying to business school as well. I'm doing this program called MLT. And I was like, well, what is that? And once I learned about MLT and applied for their MBA prep program, it really opened up just like a whole world that I had never had any exposure to. Because I was looking at going to local kind of MBA programs, staying in Louisiana. And when I joined MLT, they really challenged me, and they said, hey, our mission is to get more African-American and minority students to the top 25 business schools in the country. And so they looked at my initial list and they were like, all right, this is okay. You can keep this on your list, but like, can you look at some of these other schools too, to see if you could qualify for them, see what, if you even are interested. And, lo and behold, at the end of the program, I ended up going to Duke, which was not even on my radar, not something that I thought I could do. So those relationships were really important. And then the last one that I'll say is most recently at ParkMobile, I had really great managers, coaches, and mentors. So starting off with my first manager at ParkMobile, Bob Shepard, who really gave me a lot of opportunity to just do a ton of different things. Like I basically told him, I went to his office and I said, hey, I want to make your job easy. Like that's what I'm looking at my job as. So like anything, like I want things to only have to come to you if it's an escalation. And so that really prepared me to get promoted to really oversee all of our consumer experiences, because he gave me the bandwidth to just kind of like learn so much, ask so many questions. And then he really sponsored me in a lot of ways for that promotion. And then my next manager, Jeff Perkins, who's now the CEO of ParkMobile,
Mm.
really opened up his network to give me a lot of exposure, especially over the last year and a half. You know, allowing me to, you know, speak to different people in his network and get published in articles and just increase my visibility. And so a lot of those things, I would say the last person was John Brown, who has an amazing consulting background, and he was kind of coaching me, you know, on the side, so I could always bring any challenges or problems or questions that I had to him. And so those kinds of key people who really helped me to kind of, I knew I had good ideas, but they kind of validated those ideas or validated, you know, maybe challenged me to kind of raise the bar for what I wanted to do to a different level. So that's been kind of the key relationships that I think have really allowed me to continue to grow.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's awesome that, you know, one of your managers is not a CEO. Man, yeah. So what I would say for you all, and also anyone listening out there, for the people that have affected your life and been inflection points, if you have the ability, in one way, shape, or form, you know, send a thank you note to them, text, email, call, whatever. So now I want to shift the conversation a little bit to the intersection of mobility and inclusion. All right, so Brandon, I'm going to come back to you. You know, this is what you do, right? I don't, again, you know, going to the context of why I wanted to have this episode, don't think a lot of people think about it in terms of not only mobility, obviously, but just going about their everyday life. So, you know, any interesting things that you're seeing, you know, what are some of the key thoughts that you have? I mean, it's kind of open-ended question. You can kind of take it however you, however you see fit.
Yeah, I think, like Joy said, that how she noticed me was working with passport parking, and I think that kind of is a overarching thing for what I'm about to say, is that a lot of companies and organizations are now starting to focus on, you know, disability and inclusion in that kind of thought of accessibility, allowing everybody to access a location, you know, whether it's or a visual impairment, a hearing impairment, a mobility impairment, just making things overall accessible for everybody, because that's such a big demographic. And, you know, if you make things accessible for everybody, and, you know, everybody can access it, essentially, you don't really have to necessarily worry about people without mobility impairments seeing impairments or hearing impairments. So I've noticed that a lot. I noticed it's becoming more of a topic of discussion, and we're very excited about the direction that it's heading in. So we have a potential partnership coming up with an airport that I don't want to name yet. We're working with them to kind of help allow people with disabilities navigate the airport easier, essentially, from their journey from the parking lot to the bathroom to the check-in counter to their gate. So yeah, we're headed down that path, and I think it's time to be proactive instead of reactive. I want these companies to kind of lead the way and jump in, and don't be afraid to. It's not that different, you know, it's not different at all. So make the jump, and open up your demographic, open up your potential ways of making revenue. We travel together. We don't go alone. We tend to be with companions and friends and family, and we tell people we have a strong network of people that we talk to. So yeah, be on our good side, essentially, I guess.
Yeah. And Joy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the matter. I mean, you spent 4 years at ParkMobile, but but also you're a human being, right? And so, you know, how do you think about, you know, the intersection of mobility and inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, getting around, particularly in a city like Atlanta, right? Like, I mean, lots of the transportation is automobile based, right? We have some public transit, we have, you know, different, you know, things that we offer, but people still by and large get around with cars. And so one of the things that I was thinking about when I was at ParkMobile, you know, and I noticed Brandon and the deal that he did, you know, we were looking at ways to get accessibility data. We were working particularly with a city, Columbus, Ohio, who had a lot of interest in kind of a smart cities initiatives. And so they were very focused on how can we surface and make more transparent where accessible parking spaces are located. But, you know, it's hard to get that data in a lot of cases. I would say, you know, I looked around for lots of different service providers, and there's not one service provider really that can tell you, okay, in in every city, this is where the accessible parking spaces are. And sometimes it's even difficult to get it from the parking operators, for them to say like, wait, how many accessible spaces do you have in your garage or in your lot, and the cities themselves. And so I think that for me, that was one of the things that I really wanted to try to solve for. And people can tell you, I used to sit on Google Street View when we were working with the city of Columbus, like trying to verify, like if I saw in the Street View image, if there was an accessible parking space or whatever. And then even building on top of just accessible parking spaces, we did a lot of work to make the app in and of itself more accessible. So, there are so many great tools that the devices and the platforms today offer. So, there's voiceover capabilities and a lot of, folks who don't have to use those tools don't even realize that they exist. And so we spent a lot of time, making sure that voiceover would work with our app and, looking at color contrast for people who may have, visual impairments. And we really did an entire audit and are still working through the process of really trying to close a lot of those accessibility gaps. And I think that it's twofold, right? Like there, on the one hand, it's super important for us as a company, and I'm saying us, even though I'm not there anymore, they're my family, but it's super important for companies that work with municipalities to be thinking about accessibility, because city governments and, right of way, public space parking serves all of the citizens in these cities. And so you have to be thinking about it. I think it's really important. And then on the other side of it, when you're thinking about risk management as a company and an app developer and all of those things, as you grow, it's really important to pay attention to the laws that exist around making sure that your experiences are accessible, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're, because you didn't pay attention to this, that maybe you're in violation of some of the laws that exist out there. So you just want to be aware of that. It's really important. And it also is good for inclusion. It's a good thing to do.
Nice. No, that's awesome. As you are talking, I'm starting to think about a few other things as it relates to just inclusion in general, just even outside of transportation. But that's maybe, we can spend a few times talking about. So one of the things, again, as I mentioned earlier today around, the pandemic, is really in terms of this is event planning, right? So when people say, oh, we're having a meeting for X and it's going to be in person, but this is like, July 2021, August 2021, so on and so forth. And, I feel like as an event planner now, you have to go into, like, if you want to be an inclusive event planner, you should include for a hybrid experience, both in person and virtual, and allow people to kind of choose. And to me, if you consciously make the decision for it not to be in person, not to have a hybrid or online option, then you are cutting off an entire group of people who for various reasons, don't want to be in person. And so then that got me thinking, like, well, how much if you do that, how much that person really care about the people attending? And why are you truly doing the event? Is it more about you and the ego? And to be clear, my background is event planning, where I served thousands of event organizers. Like, that was my startup. And I understand the psychology around an event organizer. Sometimes, or in many cases, event organizers don't do stuff for the attendees. They do it to see how many people can show up so they can feel better about themselves. And so, it got me thinking, well, and to be clear, I've gotten some invitations where people are like, well, we want you in the room, but we're not going to offer it a virtual option. And I'm like, well, you just don't want me in the room then. You don't want my opinion. Like, you want to say you had Joey there, but you don't really want Joey's opinion. So, I don't know how you all think about, inclusion with various types of things, relative to the pandemic. It could be around just people's comfortability around from a health standpoint. It could be in any other areas. Brandon, for the population or the users that you serve, are there any things that you're seeing as it relates to kind of coming out of the pandemic and things that they're thinking about?
Yeah, it's actually been a pretty big topic as far as people with disabilities and being employed essentially. A lot of times people with disabilities, they don't have the opportunity to go into some place and work. There's a lot of different factors, whether it be, phantom pains and kind of pains that they experience without even doing anything essentially, as well as just kind of the access to the work essentially and being around people and having affected immune systems from time to time too. That's pretty common. And something I was actually kind of warned about as well was having a compromised immune system after my injury. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And a big topic has been how many more people have been employed, like the percentage of people with disabilities that have been employed since things have gone virtual and people have been able to work from home on their computer through Zoom and things of that nature. So allowing that space to kind of open up was something that was unforeseen to me. And I'm still learning, accessibility and barriers to entry as I go through this whole process. But I never would have imagined that I had like a 20 to 30% boost in people with disabilities having, employment now, which is a huge level of I don't want to say discrimination, but there's a big deficit there of people having disabilities and people with non-disabilities working. So it was great to see that. And I actually have an experience of, being invited to a big dinner thing that people wanted me to be a part of, but they hadn't even thought about it yet. And the location just being up a flight of stairs that I couldn't attend. And they didn't have a virtual way for me to attend, to be there, to introduce myself, to listen in on the conversation. It was just like, sorry, we'll think about it. We'll plan it better next year. So yeah, that's definitely a common factor in this thing.
That's tough. I don't know, Joe. I mean, no pressure, but any thoughts on there?
The only thing I would add is just that I think that the pandemic and lots of us being forced to go virtual really, as Brandon said, opened up a lot of people's eyes to kind of what the possibilities are. I've been 100% remote for over a year now. And my current role is literally there's not even an Atlanta office. And I think a lot of companies weren't necessarily open to that conversation prior to us being forced to go inside. But I agree, the downstream effects and just of, I love the fact I had not even thought about the fact that this would open up, let's say 20 to 30% more opportunities for people with disabilities, let's say. And I think that is an amazing byproduct, not of the pandemic, but just of companies thinking differently. And I think that that's the challenge as we're thinking about HR departments, as we're thinking about how we, think about our operations in general. How can we think differently? And ultimately, what that does is it brings in more new ideas because, most companies, if you're only working with, people who, everyone gets around the same way, no one has to think about mobility differently, then you're missing out on a segment of ideas that could really be game changing for your business or open up incremental revenue or whatever that might be. And so in the same way that we talk about ethnic diversity and gender diversity and all of these things, it really having people from different walks of life with different experiences who can speak to the culture behind that goes along with that experience, I think is always really great. So I love the fact that more people are being invited into the workforce as a result of this as well. So that's cool.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Yeah. Think differently. Think differently. Yeah, I do want to talk about next, where people are, where you all are today. I think, Brandon, you may have hinted at it, but I do have a quick other example. So early in the pandemic, or I want to say last year, I was on Clubhouse and did a conversation, entrepreneur that was overseas. I want to say they were in the Netherlands or something. Asked me a question around UI and UX. But he could not see. And so his question is around, entrepreneurs and you're building these startups, but, you can't even see the product that you have. And I had never, ever considered that before. Like, and the reason I bring that up is I think there are so many use cases we don't think about, and many people who take things for granted, like the ability to walk or to see or to hear or something like that. And I think it's our responsibility as people who make decisions, whatever the type of decision-making power you have, to be as inclusive as possible. And again, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this particular episode is to shine a light on the opportunity to do so. And I think to Joy's point, think differently opens up a lot of other opportunities for you. And so, Brandon, where do things sit today? You kind of hinted at some pilots and some other things, where you sit today, and then also, where do you see yourself moving forward with iAccess Life?
Yeah, so that's a great question, honestly, because iAccess Life, and I'm guilty of the UX and UI kind of thing as well. We need to work a little bit more to be able to provide access to those who have visual impairments and hearing impairments ourselves. Like I said, we're still learning as we go along, and a lot of my focus at the time was on physical and mobility impairments and accessing physical locations. And of course, there's blind people out there, there's people that have hearing impairments out there, but until you're in their shoes and until you know what they need, you don't know how to serve them at the time. So I don't feel like people should feel bad about things. It's just time to kind of be aware of these things and start to take progressive steps. And like Joy was saying, include those people in your workforce and include those people in your conversations and meetings, because they open up your product to so many other different demographics, essentially. So as far as iAccess, we're definitely looking to expand our mobile platform, our offering on there, whether that be partnerships with Passport, who we are working on that currently with, and allowing people to pay for their parking from their phone through our application. We also have this disability etiquette and inclusion training or workshop that we do now as well. And that's more for corporate and smaller businesses, restaurant groups, things of that nature, to kind of train their management staff as well as their customer facing employees how to meet, greet, and accommodate those with disabilities. People first, identity first language, essentially, and small things that you can do around your location just to make it more accessible for those with disabilities, and bigger things as well if you have some budget for that. So we're trying to educate people. We want to be the experts in this space. And I think the product that we're most excited about, which I don't want to speak too much about yet because it's still in the works and we still have some things going there, but it's pretty much going to be in a customer experience feedback platform. So we are giving ourselves a way to make actionable change. The app was really great. It was to allow people to know where to go and places to avoid. And the ultimate goal was for these locations to see the market of people that they were missing out on, the friends, the family, and hopefully make a change. But now we actually have a way to, set these customer experience collections up, essentially inside a location, inside a hotel, inside a restaurant, get feedback from their customers and give actionable ways to fix things and, actually start making a change. So that's what we're really excited about. And we hope some more people reach out to us about that. And you can find us at our website, www.iaccess.life, and info@iaccess.life as well, if you want to reach out to us and start talking.
Nice. Yeah. So let me reiterate one thing that Brandon said. Like, listen, if you had a restaurant, you have a physical space, anybody in general, if you want to learn more about, inclusion as it relates to mobility or other areas, hit this brother up, hit him up, go through a training, have an initial conversation, and then put your team through. I'll advocate in some way, shape, or form there. Joy,
exactly. And we don't want to scare people off by making it so much of a cost to entry, essentially. So we have ways to do things without having to spend a whole bunch of money. Don't be turned off at the fact that, hey, if we come there, we tell you that your place isn't accessible, that you have to spend all this money or spend a whole bunch of money on staff or things of that nature. We're very open to giving feedback and helping you out and working with you guys. So definitely reach out. Don't be scared to touch base with us.
Nice. Joy, what about you? What's next? New job? What's next in general?
Yeah, I mean, I am really enjoying the process of getting my feet under me at Root and learning a lot about the insurance space. And it's funny, even this conversation today I'm a curious person by nature. And so this conversation, usually when I'm talking to people, all of these great ideas start to like these questions start to come up in my mind. So one of the things that just came to mind for me as we were talking is like, I wonder like how insurance is affected by disabilities. Like, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully, it's equitable, but I don't really know. So that's something I'm going to go research and try to think about a little bit. And even also talking about the app space. And UX design, when you were mentioning that, Joey, one of the things that also came to mind for me is, you know, thinking about UX not only or design not only from the perspective of graphics and images and colors on within an experience, but I think it would be so interesting to see someone who might be visually impaired. What might they design if there were no like graphics at all? What if they were just designing for users who were also visually impaired and had to use voiceover? If you took away the graphical element and the images, what might design look like if you started from a different framework? So all of that kinds of stuff is like just so interesting to me. And so I'm probably going to be thinking about a lot of that and just doing a little bit of research and trying to challenge myself to expand how I think about these problems, and how how we could potentially come up with new and innovative solutions. So that's really what this discussion has done for me. And Brandon, I'd love to keep in contact and just kind of keep track of what you're doing. I think it's awesome. So thanks, Joey, for the opportunity. Yeah.
No
I love
problem.
I'd love to say absolutely. I love that. I also have Root Insurance, so let's figure out if they are discriminating against people with disabilities and their insurance. My insurance feels a little too high. I think we can get it down or a little bit better, more comfortable. So we'll stay in contact. For sure.
Okay, great. I'm glad you're a customer.
I'm gonna need that. I'm gonna need that 30% discount. But no, it's good. This is awesome. This is awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I think in closing, I don't know if you all want to have any words, but I would say not any official closing. I would just say, just generally speaking, think differently. If you're out there, think differently about inclusion. Think differently about mobility. And I'll say this too. Absolutely support. Brandon. I want to. How about this? I'm gonna cue it up. I'm gonna go to Joy first for anything that she wants to close with. And Brian, I'm gonna give you a second to think about this. Are there any ways that people can assist you as an entrepreneur? Well, Joy, I'm gonna kick it to you. Any final words or thoughts or anything like that?
Not a ton of final words of thoughts for me. Really, just excited for the opportunity to continue this conversation. I think it's great that we're talking about the importance of relationships, particularly within the technology ecosystem. Like Joey, I mentioned in my LinkedIn post, kind of promoting this today, that when I first arrived in Atlanta 10 years ago, I think Goodie Nation was one of the first organizations that I plugged in with. I was just looking for ways to get involved and meet people, and so I think that that has grown into a variety of different ways for me to continue to connect with Goodie Nation and also to kind of meet other people. And a lot of those relationships that I formed kind of in those first few years in Atlanta, when I was just kind of out there, like being scrappy and meeting people and building relationships, like have really paid dividends over the last decade. And so I think that this is such an important conversation to continue to have. And so just thanks for having me today.
Awesome. Brandon, any final words, and also how can people help?
Yeah, stop parking in handicap spots if you don't need them. No, pretty much just be an advocate. It's like one of those things that if I don't want to say violence or silence is violence, but it's like one of those things where speak up, kind of have a say in some things and be on the forefront. I don't know, just follow us at iAccess Life, essentially. Keep in contact with what we're doing, tell a friend about us, tell a family member about what we're doing. We're trying to expand and kind of become more of a mainstream, not just like we're focused on disabilities, but we want everybody to be able to go have fun, whether you have a stroller, whatever it may be. So yeah, talk about iAccess Lives, talk about accessibility in general. Don't be afraid of the topic. It's you don't know until you know. So don't let your ignorance be your bliss, essentially. It can come back and bite you in the butt down the road. So Yeah, that's it for me.
Nice. Cool. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. You all and everyone watching, thank you for tuning in. A few things, Brandon, Joy, hopefully the relationship kind of continues offline, and Joy, feel free to give him some advice and so on and so forth. Maybe even make some warm intros. And for everyone else watching, again, same thing. Coaching, warm intros, customers, capital providers for Brandon, but also follow us at Goodie Nation. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. This has been an awesome conversation, and look out for more for Goodie Nation moving forward. Be safe, y'all, and peace out. See you later.
Beautiful.
Awesome.